Hey guys, I wanted to make a short video today. I haven't been making a full-length instructional video every day because I no longer have any students who are classified as long-term remote learners. But this week I have had a few be put into quarantine, and so I wanted to make sure that those of you who are at home or even absent had a little bit of a heads up as to what's changed about the schedule this week, and to give you a little bit of instruction for today. So here we are on Thursday. Let me just kind of go back over what we did this week. Monday was a snow day. Tuesday, we started reading Letter from Birmingham Jail, and we did the first 3 questions together. So if you're at home, go ahead and answer the first 3 questions and do the annotating. And then today, we finished reading it. Students finished reading it on their own. And you didn't have to answer all the questions, just do the annotating that it tells you at the beginning of each question where it says, highlight something in paragraph, whatever. So I want you to do the annotating plus any other annotations that you want to make. We were specifically looking for extreme or absolute language, and quoted words were the 2 signposts that we were looking for in this letter. So make sure that you finish reading that and doing those annotations. You don't have to do the check your understanding or the analyze the text yet. We may come back to that. You'll see that it has not been assigned to you in Ed. Today, you do have 2 assignments assigned in Ed. They actually show to have been due yesterday. I just didn't change that due date, but they are actually for today. And that is to do the Get Ready page and the Read page of Elsewhere. It's a poem. You'll find that in Ed. And then also in your assignment, you have a Cami doc that we're going to be using to mark up the text. And you also have your poetry annotation guide that you will be able to look at. I posted that yesterday. So you'll be able to look at those documents. Those 3 items are what you'll need today. So let's go to the Cami Get Ready page. I'm going to open that up. And then here is your Elsewhere document. I already have this open with Cami. It won't look exactly the same way as yours does. We're only going to do 2 stanzas today together, and we're going to read it together today. So make sure you read the entire poem. And then we're going to annotate the first 2 stanzas. So you can just kind of follow along and make sure that you get that done, including paraphrasing it. Now, I'm going to be replying to myself, but when you click reply, it'll have your initials there, and you'll be able to reply to any questions that I put out as a comment over here. Okay, so let's go back to the Get Ready page and look at what we're going to do. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about was just kind of to remind you that we've read other poems this year, and you've written 2 poems this year. This is our 4th poem to read. If you'll remember back to Unit 1, we read Without Title about the Native American father who lived his life without his Native American culture and his rituals and how that affected his life. We also, in Unit 2, read Mirror. That was told by Sylvia Plath. That was told from the point of view of the mirror. And then you wrote your own poem kind of in response to that from the point of view of an inanimate object. And you can go back in Google Classroom if you want to look at that poem that you wrote. Then in Unit 3, last 6 weeks, we read the poem Carrie. We were looking at the theme of water with those a couple of selections that were paired together. And that one was about the fish, someone fishing, and they pulled out of the water this fish that had a dead hawk attached to it. And then it went on to describe the water in great detail. And then you wrote a nature poem. So you have quite a bit of experience with poetry this year. We've already used that poetry annotation guide several times. So a lot of this will just be review for you. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is the form of the poem. So let's just look at it here. And this is kind of your little introductory activity. The form means what it looks like on the page. So up here at the top, you can just add a text box and type the word form, and then tell me, and we've done this before too, I remember this, how many stanzas and how many lines per stanza. So blank stanzas with blank number of lines, okay? So you can annotate that. And that's the form, how it looks on the page. The next thing we're going to look at is the quick start. And so to refer back to our essential question, those of you that may not have been here this week, we did start a new unit. It's a new 6 weeks, last week actually. What do we need in order to feel free? And reading Letter from Birmingham Jail, it talks a lot about the plight of African Americans during the 60s trying to gain their civil rights, and when they were still, segregation was still in place in the South. So you can think about that in history, but you could also think about things that are going on today. So what's going on right now somewhere in the world? Anywhere but Or City, okay? It could be somewhere in the United States or somewhere outside of the United States. Something that concerns you. Is there a war or a refugee crisis or a tyrannical leader committing atrocities against his own people? What is it like to live in a relatively peaceful, stable place, knowing that these things are going on in another part of the world or perhaps even in another part of the country? And so I want you to highlight this paragraph and just do a little free write about that in a note. So what thing around the world or around the country concerns you right now? If you're wondering about some things that you're not sure how to answer this, if you'll go to your CAMI document, you have a link right here called Global Conflict Tracker. And if you click on that and follow that link, it will take you to, this was a really neat website that I found, it will take you to a map that shows some hot spots around the world. The red are critical, the orange are significant, and the green are limited. And we'll use these later on talking about other things in the poem. But just looking at this, territorial disputes in the South China Sea, the North Korea crisis. So if you click on that, it will give you details about that. The estimated number of nuclear weapons, the number of nuclear weapons that they've tested, the number of U.S. troops in South Korea right now is 20. So we have 26,540 men and women in uniform from the United States there, protecting our interest and our joint interest with the South Koreans. So that is an area of concern. So if you want to look at one of these places and think about it, maybe read up about it a little bit, and that might help you with your answer. Okay, so let's go back then to the Get Ready page. You can pause the video and work on that for a minute. Now let's focus on the genre. We are again talking about poetry. Remember that anytime you have this focus on the genre box, you need to read that and make sure that you understand. I won't read it all to you because you know we've done this several times and you know what the elements of poetry are, but just go ahead and review that. And then this is specifically written in free verse. The last several poems that we've read have been written in free verse, meaning that it doesn't have a regular pattern of rhyme or rhythm. Now, it may have some rhythm and some rhyme, but it doesn't have a regular pattern of it. And the main aspect of free verse, the main characteristic of free verse is that it has a natural flow of lines that mimics the flow of everyday speech. And so remember that when you are reading it, and you'll be able to listen to it if you want to, when you are reading it, you don't stop at the end of a line and read it line by line, and especially in free verse. You follow the punctuation that the author has put there. If there's a comma, you pause. If there's a period, you do a full stop. So that's something that you need to think about. A common misconception that some students have is that you stop at the end of every line, kind of like, nursery rhyme or something. Okay, so elsewhere is written in 4-line stanzas or groups of lines in free verse, which does not contain a regular pattern of rhythm or rhyme, has a natural flow of speech. Now, here's the new thing that we're going to be learning about, and that is different kinds of rhyme. So we've only talked about one kind of rhyme this year, and that is exact rhyme, where the words end with the exact same sound, not necessarily the letters, but the exact same sound at the end, kind of like you rhymed when you were in elementary school and trying to write a poem, and you said, okay, what rhymes with ant? Can't. And then you wrote a line that had can't at the end. Okay. Um, Mud, dud, um, sud, suds. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, you get the point. So, um, words that rhyme exactly end in the exact same sound. There are other types of rhyme. So here they give you some other examples: heat and complete, stab and taxicab, stranglehold and marigold. That's an interesting rhyme. Dish and squish. Full rhyme or perfect rhyme is another terms that you might hear those called by. Slant rhyme is something different. A pair of words include the same vowel or the same consonant sound at the end, making it seem like kind of the author intended for that sound to not necessarily rhyme, but for it to be related, and it kind of adds to the poem. That's part of what we look for in a poem is sound devices or sounds that the author uses. So care and dear, they don't rhyme. They don't have the same internal vowel sound, care, dear, but they kind of sound similar at the end. Shape and keep, both end with that P sound. Grudge and bridge, detach and unpack. So those have the same inner vowel sound at the end. So sometimes this is called half rhyme, imperfect rhyme, near rhyme, oblique rhyme, or off rhyme. But we're going to call it slant rhyme. So it doesn't exactly rhyme. Okay. So you have exact rhyme and then you have slant rhyme that kind of tries to rhyme, but it doesn't exactly get there. But it sounds like the author may have kind of intended for it to. And then I rhyme is something very different from these two. The words really don't sound that much alike at all, but in the way that they're spelled, they end in the same letter. So a pair of words have similar spellings but are pronounced differently, like love and move. So you know all about how we've talked about the English language and how it's so hard for somebody else to learn it because all of our spelling rules, there's 20 exceptions to every rule. And these two words look like they should be pronounced pretty much the same except for the first two letters, and they don't. Through and tough, look how different those are. But they each end with an OUGH. Laughter and slaughter, enemies and flies. So sight rhyme means visually they look like they should rhyme, but they actually don't rhyme at all. Okay, so in this poem, we do have several instances of exact rhyme, slant rhyme, and I rhyme. So I want you to be looking for those and mark those up in the text when you get to those. Within a work of literature, a motif is a repeated image or idea or theme that can tie ideas together. That's one of our unit vocabulary. If you go here to the Quizlet set, you might want to go and review some of your words here. Here are our words, and if you get down here to, there's free verse, exact rhyme, slant rhyme, I rhyme, and here's motif, a repeated image, idea, or theme that can tie ideas together. It's almost like a theme in literature, but instead of being more kind of what a theme is more like what the lesson that the author wants you to learn or what they want you to take away from it. A motif is just kind of like a symbol or something that's repeated throughout that can help establish the theme. I'm going to turn my light back on real fast. Okay. So don't forget, just a reminder to be studying the Unit 4 vocabulary because you will be tested over that at some point. And of course, you'll be using those terms throughout. Okay, so next, I was going to look at an example of motif. So Um, in Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, um, he expresses hope for many different things. That becomes a motif throughout, the motif of hope. If you'll remember back when we read The Seventh Man, about the big tsunami, the big wave, that had a motif of water, and we had that compared to that poem called Carrie that had the motif of water as well. Um, it's kind of a play on words, but water was a theme that ran throughout both of those pieces of literature. Okay, so we're going to skip over this little activity down here. But if you look at the poem Elsewhere, which we're doing now, it employs the motif of location. Okay. Although a location is never specified, the poem makes references to locations throughout, but it's always somewhere or here or where or elsewhere. It never tells you exactly where any of those things are taking place. And I don't think the author maybe even had in mind exactly where these things are taking place. They're just ideas of things that have taken place in history and will take place in the future, and at any given time are taking place somewhere in the world, um, as uh, as referenced by this global conflict tracker that you can go back and look at again as well. Okay, so motif. Um, let's go ahead and move on to our next page, which is the read, and we'll look at the background of Derek Walcott. He was a Caribbean poet and playwright. He was raised on the tiny island of St. Lucia. He's of African, English, and Dutch descent, and his father died when he was very young. His mother was a teacher, and she guided him in his education, and he published his first poem at the age of 14. And later on, in his later life, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, which is the highest prize that you can win. Well, there's Pulitzer Prize and Nobel Prize. Both of those are very prestigious honors. Um, he explores racial, cultural, and colonial history of the Caribbean. And this poem is dedicated to the English poet Stephen Spender, who he admired and who's also wrote poems with themes about social injustice. So let's just kind of revisit our question one more time. What do we need in order to feel free? So, as you read this poem, think about those themes of freedom and what it takes for someone to feel free. So, I'm not going to read this poem to you. You have the option here to have it played for you out loud, or you can read it for yourself and you can pause and you can come back. Okay. You don't need to answer the questions right now or do any annotations on the ed page. Okay, so you've paused it and you've finished reading, and now we're going to move on to our annotations um, on the Cami page. So you should have this open. You've already typed out what the form of the poem is. Now let's look at the first two stanzas together. Somewhere a white horse gallops with its mane plunging round a field whose sticks are ringed with barbed wire, and men break stones or bind straw into ricks. Somewhere women tire of the shawled seas weeping, for the fishermen's dories still go out. It is blue as peace. Somewhere they're tired of torture stories. So the first thing I want you to do is think about the rhyme. So we have mane, sticks, men, and ricks. So just for instance, I'll do the first one with you. We have exact rhyme here with sticks and ricks. So I'm going to get a shape over here. I'm going to get a line, and I'm just going to do a line here and a line here. And then I'm going to do a text box, and I'm going to say this is exact rhyme. But look at the other two, main and men. Those do not rhyme exactly. If you were here in class, I would let you answer that, but those do not rhyme exactly. However, they do end in the same ending sound. So again, I'm going to get a line, if I can, shapes, line, And I'm going to draw a line. Let's see how to do that. Here and here. And then another text box. And this is slant rhyme. Okay, so I want you to do that for this paragraph as well. I want you to tell me what the rhyme is, how these words are related as far as rhyme. I'm not so concerned that your annotations and your drawing is just exactly the same as mine, but I want the information to be there. All right, so finish up the rhyme on this second stanza as well. So then I want us to think about the meaning of this. Somewhere a white horse gallops, with its mane plunging round a field whose sticks are ringed with barbed wire, and men break stones or bind straw into ricks. If you look up this word, actually, if you click on it, it gives you this long list of definitions, stacks of hay. So men bind straw or break stones. So if you don't know, sometimes prisoners, either prisoners of the state or prisoners of war, are made to break up stones for whatever reason, sometimes just for punishment, but sometimes they needed stones broken up to build things with and do different things with. So that's a common theme among prisoners, breaking rocks. And it says here also gathering up straw and putting them into bundles. So that kind of makes me think of a past time when they didn't have hay balers. And if you've ever watched an old movie, they would just actually gather up the straw by hand and tie it together in a bundle. And then they would put those bundles in the barn, or stack them up in a circle, stand them up in a circle for the winter to feed the animals during the winter. But anyway, what image does that bring to mind? Okay. And I want you to paraphrase that stanza in your own words right here. So just rewrite it in your own words. So it shouldn't sound like a poem, it should just sound like prose, just like a sentence. Okay? Somewhere women tire of the shawled seas weeping. Think about the figurative language here, seas weeping. So you could look back at your poetry annotation guide and find out what color that would be, what kind of figurative language is, and what color that would be. I'll let you do that, and if you have any questions, you can always email me and we talk about it, but I do want you to do some of this on your own. The seas weeping. For the fishermen's dories, if you look at that definition, dory is a rowboat. Still go out. It is blue as peace. I think there's some figurative language there. Somewhere they're tired of torture stories. Now, I'm just going to tell you, this poem is very, very hard to understand. So I want you to just do the best you can. So here again, I'm going to ask that you paraphrase this stanza. And just do the best you can. Put it in your own words. You may not know exactly what it means, but paraphrase it. So basically, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. It's been pretty long, but again, just to review, the main things you need to do today is read the whole poem. Tell me about its form. Tell me about the first two stanzas and how they rhyme, if they do. And then paraphrase the first two stanzas, as well as look for any examples of simile, metaphor, personification, or hyperbole, and look at your poetry annotation guide that's posted in the assignment and highlight those. Tomorrow I can give you a copy or show you a copy so that you can kind of match them up and see how you did. But right now I want you to do some of that on your own, okay? So that's all I have for you today right now, and we will be continuing to read this tomorrow. So you can look for another video over that, and you can go ahead and be working on some of that. It'll be some of the same things, the markups that we always do with it. So I'll talk to you tomorrow. Email me if you have any questions.